The first thing I remember after the accident is the sound of a man's voice calling my name. It was not a familiar voice. It was not a voice that stirred any recognition in the foggy, fragmented landscape of my mind. It was just a voice, warm and urgent and full of fear, and it was saying my name over and over again like a prayer. Claire, Claire, can you hear me? Please, Claire, open your eyes. Please, please open your eyes. The words echoed through the darkness, bouncing off walls I couldn't see, reverberating through corridors of my consciousness that had been shattered by the impact. I wanted to open my eyes. I wanted to see who was speaking to me, who was calling my name with such desperate, aching tenderness. I wanted to reach out, to touch something solid, to anchor myself to a reality that felt like it was slipping away. But my body wouldn't cooperate. My eyelids felt like they were made of lead, too heavy to lift, too heavy to even flutter. My limbs were numb, disconnected from my consciousness, as if they belonged to someone else entirely. And my mind, my poor, broken mind, was a jumble of fractured images and half-formed thoughts, a puzzle that had been scattered across the floor and could not be put back together. The voice continued, sometimes close, sometimes far away, sometimes accompanied by other voices. Voices that used words I didn't understand. Words like contusion and temporal lobe and retrograde amnesia. Words that floated through the darkness and disappeared before I could grasp their meaning. And underneath all of it, the steady, rhythmic beeping of machines, the hum of fluorescent lights, the antiseptic smell of a hospital room that I couldn't see but could somehow sense. I was trapped in a liminal space, a place between sleeping and waking, between life and death, between the person I had been and the person I was becoming. And in that space, all I could do was listen to the voice that called my name and wonder who it belonged to. I learned later that I had been in a coma for 11 days. The details were explained to me slowly, carefully, by doctors who spoke in hushed, professional tones and by a man who claimed to be my husband. A car accident. A rainy night on a slick highway, the kind of night when visibility was reduced to almost nothing and the road became a treacherous ribbon of water and reflected light. I had been driving home from a work conference in another city, a trip I had made dozens of times before without incident. But that night was different. That night, a semi-truck had jackknifed across 3 lanes of traffic, its trailer swinging out like a massive, unstoppable pendulum. I had been exhausted, my eyes gritty from lack of sleep, my mind foggy from too many hours on the road. And I hadn't seen the truck until it was too late. The impact had been catastrophic. My car, a modest sedan that I had bought because it had good safety ratings, had been crushed like a tin can. The jaws of life had been required to extract me from the wreckage. And when they finally pulled me out, I was barely alive, my body broken in a dozen places, my brain swelling inside my skull. The doctors had told my husband that I might never wake up. They had prepared him for the possibility that even if I did, I might not be the same person he had married. Brain injuries were unpredictable, they said. Some patients recovered fully. Some were left with permanent disabilities. Some woke up as different people entirely, their personalities altered, their memories erased, their very identities transformed by the trauma. They had advised him to be patient, to be prepared, to hope for the best but expect the worst. And he had sat by my bedside for 11 days, holding my hand, talking to me, willing me to come back to him. But I did wake up, and the first thing I saw when I finally managed to open my eyes was the face of a stranger. He was sitting beside my bed, his hands clasped around mine, his eyes red and swollen from crying. He was a handsome man, probably in his late 30s, with dark hair that was disheveled and a growth of stubble on his jaw that suggested he hadn't shaved in days. His clothes were rumpled, his posture was hunched, and there were deep shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and endless worry. He looked exhausted, hollowed out, as if he had been through something terrible and had emerged on the other side only barely intact. And when he saw my eyes open, his face lit up with a joy so pure and so intense that it almost hurt to look at. "Claire," he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. "Oh, thank God. You're awake. You're finally awake. I thought I'd lost you." I stared at him, my mind struggling to make sense of what I was seeing. I knew, in some vague, instinctive way, that this man was important to me. I could feel the warmth of his hand around mine, the tenderness in his touch, the love that radiated from him like heat from a fire. There was something in his eyes, something in the way he looked at me, that spoke of years of shared history and deep, abiding affection. But I didn't know who he was. I couldn't place his face, couldn't attach a name to his features, couldn't find him in the shattered fragments of my memory. He was a stranger, a kind, loving, desperate stranger, but a stranger nonetheless. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice hoarse and weak, barely above a whisper. The words felt like they were being dragged out of me, pulled from some deep, painful place that I didn't understand. I don't remember who you are." The look on his face when I said those words will haunt me for the rest of my life. It was a look of pure, devastating heartbreak, the look of a man who had just been told that everything he loved had been taken from him. His grip on my hand tightened, and his eyes filled with fresh tears, and for a long moment, he just stared at me, as if he were waiting for me to say that it was a joke. That, of course, I remembered him, that I was just confused from the medication and the trauma and the long, dark days of unconsciousness. "I'm your husband," he said finally, his voice trembling with the effort of keeping himself together. "I'm Daniel. We've been married for 9 years. We have 2 children together, Sophie and Michael. Sophie is 7 and Michael is 5. They've been asking about you every day. They've been waiting for you to come home." He paused, swallowing hard, and when he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. "You remember them, don't you? You have to remember them. You have to remember your own children." But I didn't remember. I didn't remember Daniel. I didn't remember Sophie and Michael. I didn't remember the 9 years of marriage, the 2 children, the life we had built together. I didn't remember the wedding that Daniel would later describe to me in painstaking detail, the garden ceremony with the white flowers and the string quartet, and the tears of joy on the faces of everyone we loved. I didn't remember the house with the wraparound porch and the garden I had apparently tended with such care. I didn't remember the births of my children, the moment when I had first held them in my arms and felt my heart expand with a love so fierce and so primal that it had changed me forever. It was all gone, erased by the trauma of the accident, wiped clean like a chalkboard. My past was a blank, a void, an empty space where my memories should have been. And no matter how hard I tried to reach into that void, to grasp at the fragments of a life that had been stolen from me, I came up empty. The doctors explained it to me later, in careful, clinical terms that were designed to be reassuring, but only made me feel more lost. Retrograde amnesia, a common consequence of traumatic brain injury. The memories that were lost, they said, might come back in time. The brain was a remarkable organ, capable of healing itself in ways that modern medicine didn't fully understand. Some patients recovered their memories gradually, over weeks or months. Some recovered them suddenly, in a rush, triggered by a familiar sight or sound or smell. And some never recovered them at all, forced to rebuild their lives from scratch, to learn who they were from the stories of others. There was no way to predict which category I would fall into, no treatment that could guarantee recovery. I would simply have to wait and see. And so I waited. I lay in my hospital bed, surrounded by strangers who claimed to be my family, and I tried to remember. Daniel brought photographs of our life together, spreading them out on the blanket like offerings to a goddess who had forgotten her worshippers. Our wedding, a beautiful ceremony in a garden, surrounded by flowers and friends, both of us young and radiant and full of hope for the future. Our children, Sophie with her father's dark hair and my green eyes, Michael with his gap-toothed grin and his endless supply of energy. Our house, a charming Victorian on a tree-lined street, with a porch swing and a garden that was bursting with color. He pointed to each photograph, his voice steady despite the tears that kept threatening to spill from his eyes, and he told me the story behind each one. "This is our honeymoon," he said, holding up a picture of the 2 of us on a beach, the ocean stretching out behind us like a sheet of blue glass. "We went to Italy. 2 weeks in a little town on the Amalfi Coast. You fell in love with the lemon trees. You said you wanted to plant one in our backyard, even though you knew it wouldn't survive the winters. I looked at the photograph, at the happy couple smiling into the camera, and I felt nothing. No spark of recognition. No flicker of memory. Just the dull, aching awareness that these people were strangers to me, that the woman in the photograph was someone I used to be but no longer recognized. And this is Sophie's first day of school, Daniel continued, showing me another picture. She was so nervous. She held your hand the entire walk to the bus stop. When the bus came, she didn't want to let go. You had to promise her that you'd be waiting at the same spot when she came home. And you were. Every single day, you were there. He showed me pictures of birthday parties and family vacations and quiet moments at home. Pictures of me holding my children, reading to them, tucking them into bed. Pictures of a life that was full and rich and beautiful, a life that I had apparently lived but couldn't remember. And through it all, I felt like I was watching a movie about someone else's life, a story that had nothing to do with me. But then, one night, something strange happened. Something that would change everything. I was alone in my hospital room, the lights dimmed, the machines beeping softly in the background. The nurses had checked on me an hour ago, adjusting my and taking my vitals, and now I was drifting in and out of sleep, my mind floating in that strange, liminal space between consciousness and unconsciousness. The medication they had given me made everything fuzzy, blurred the edges of reality until it was hard to tell what was real and what was dream. And in that space, I saw a face. It was not Daniel's face. It was the face of another man, a man I didn't recognize, but whose features stirred something deep inside me, something that felt almost like memory. He was younger than Daniel, probably in his early 30s, with sandy blonde hair that fell across his forehead and blue eyes that sparkled with mischief and a smile that was warm and easy and utterly disarming. He was standing in a sunlit field, surrounded by wildflowers that swayed in a gentle breeze, and he was laughing. Not just laughing, giggling, the way a child giggles, with pure, unguarded joy. And I was laughing too. I could hear it, a sound that seemed to come from somewhere far away, a sound that was both foreign and deeply familiar. The man reached out and took my hand, and I felt the warmth of his touch, the roughness of his palm, the way his fingers intertwined with mine as if they belonged there. "Come on," he said, his voice full of excitement. "I want to show you something." And then he was pulling me through the field, and we were running, our laughter trailing behind us like ribbons in the wind. The sky above us was impossibly blue, dotted with white clouds that looked like they had been painted there by an artist. The sun was warm on my skin, and the scent of wildflowers filled the air, and I felt a happiness so pure and so complete that it brought tears to my eyes. I woke with a start, my heart pounding, my skin slick with sweat. The face lingered in my mind, vivid and clear, more real than any of the photographs Daniel had shown me. The man's smile, the sound of his laugh, the feeling of his hand in mine, it was all so real, so immediate, so achingly familiar. Who was that man? Why did his face stir such powerful emotions in me? And why did I feel, in some deep, instinctive part of myself, that he was important? More important, perhaps, than anything else in the life I couldn't remember? I asked Daniel about it the next day, my voice hesitant, my words careful. Was there someone else? I asked. Before we met, was there another man in my life? Someone I loved before I loved you? Daniel's face went pale, and for a moment, he didn't answer. His jaw tightened, and his eyes flickered away from mine, and I saw something in his expression that I hadn't seen before. Something that looked almost like fear, or jealousy, or both. "There was someone," he said finally, his voice carefully neutral. "A long time ago, before we met. But I didn't think he was important enough to mention. You never talked about him much. I assumed he was just part of your past, someone you had moved on from." "Who was he?" I asked, my heart pounding. "What was his name?" Daniel hesitated, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "His name was Alex. Alex Morgan. He was your college boyfriend. You dated for a few years, and then you broke up. I met you about a year after it ended. You were still getting over him, I think. But by the time we got married, I thought, I thought he was ancient history. I didn't think he still mattered. But he did matter. Because the face in my dream, the face that stirred such powerful emotions in me, was the face of Alex Morgan. I knew it with a certainty that went beyond logic, beyond evidence, beyond anything that could be explained by reason alone. The man in the sunlit field was Alex. The man whose hand felt like it belonged in mine was Alex. And the happiness I had felt in that dream, the pure, unguarded joy, was the happiness I had felt when I was with him. The realization hit me like a wave, knocking the air from my lungs and leaving me gasping. I had been so focused on trying to remember Daniel, on trying to reconstruct the life that he described, that I had missed something important. My mind was not empty. My memories were not gone. They were just buried, hidden beneath the surface, waiting for the right trigger to bring them to the surface. And the trigger, it seemed, was not my husband or my children or the life we had built together. The trigger was Alex Morgan. I began to dream about Alex more and more frequently. Not every night, but often enough that I started to look forward to sleep, to crave the escape that it offered from the confusing reality of my waking life. In my dreams, I was young and carefree and deeply, desperately in love. I was walking along a beach at sunset, my hand in Alex's, the waves lapping at our feet. I was sitting in a crowded coffee shop, leaning across the table to kiss him, the taste of espresso on his lips. I was lying in a field of wildflowers, staring up at the sky, feeling like the world belonged to us and we belonged to each other. These dreams were so vivid, so real, so filled with emotion that I began to dread waking up. Because when I woke up, I was back in the hospital, back in the confusion and the fear and the overwhelming sense of loss that had defined my life since the accident. Daniel noticed the change in me. How could he not? I had stopped asking him about our life together. I had stopped looking at the photographs he brought. I had retreated into myself, into the world of my dreams, into the memories of a man I had loved before I even knew Daniel existed. And Daniel, poor, patient, heartbroken Daniel, didn't know what to do. "You're thinking about him, aren't you?" he said one afternoon, his voice quiet and sad. "Alex, you're thinking about Alex." I didn't deny it. I couldn't. The dreams were too powerful, too consuming, too much a part of me now. "I can't help it," I said. "When I dream about him, I feel things. Real things. Things I don't feel when I'm awake. Things I don't feel when I look at you. And I don't know what that means. I don't know who I am anymore." Daniel was silent for a long moment, his face a mask of pain. Then he said, very softly, "I love you, Claire. I've loved you since the day I met you. And I believe, with all my heart, that you loved me too. Not in the past, not before the accident, but now, in the present. I believe that somewhere inside you, the woman who loved me is still there, waiting to be found. And I'm not going to give up on her. I'm not going to give up on us." His words touched me, moved me in ways I hadn't expected, but they couldn't compete with the power of my dreams, with the pull of a past that felt more real than my present. I needed to know who Alex Morgan was. I needed to see him, to talk to him, to understand why his face haunted my sleep and his touch lingered on my skin. I needed to find the missing pieces of myself, and I believed, with a desperate, irrational certainty, that those pieces were hidden in my memories of him. "Find him for me," I said to Daniel. "Please. I know it's a strange thing to ask. I know it hurts you, but I need to see him. I need to understand. If I'm ever going to find my way back to you, I need to find my way back to myself first. And I think Alex might be the key." Daniel resisted at first. He told me it was a bad idea, that I was confused, that I needed to focus on my recovery. He reminded me that I had a family, a husband, and children who were waiting for me to come home. He asked me to be patient, to give myself time, to trust that the memories would return on their own. But I was insistent. I was consumed. I couldn't let go of the face in my dreams, the voice that called to me from the past, the feeling of wholeness that came over me when I remembered Alex. And so, reluctantly, painfully, Daniel agreed. He tracked down Alex Morgan through a combination of social media and old friends, and he arranged for a meeting. The day it happened, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, preparing to jump into the unknown. We met in a coffee shop, a quiet little place with exposed brick walls and the smell of fresh coffee in the air. I had chosen the location, or perhaps it had chosen me. It reminded me, in some strange, indefinable way, of the coffee shop in my dreams, the one where Alex had leaned across the table to kiss me. He was waiting for me when I arrived, sitting at a table by the window, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. He looked older than the man in my dreams, his hair thinner and his face more lined, but the smile was the same, warm and easy and full of mischief. "Claire," he said, standing up as I approached. His voice was soft, almost reverent, as if he were speaking a prayer. I couldn't believe it when Daniel called me. I thought I'd never see you again. I sat down across from him, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples. "I don't remember you," I said honestly. "Not really. Just fragments. Dreams. But when I see your face, I feel something. Something I don't feel when I look at Daniel. And I need to understand what that means." Alex's expression softened, and he reached across the table to take my hand. His touch was warm and familiar, and I felt a jolt of recognition, a spark of something that might have been memory or might have been longing. "We were in love," he said quietly. "Deeply, desperately in love. We met when we were 19, in a creative writing class. You sat in front of me, and I spent the entire semester staring at the back of your head, trying to work up the courage to talk to you. When I finally did, we talked for 4 hours straight. I missed my next class because I didn't want to leave. I remember thinking, even then, that you were the most interesting person I had ever met." He talked for hours, weaving a tapestry of memories that felt both foreign and strangely familiar. He told me about the years of college, the late nights studying together in the library, the cheap dinners at diners, and the long walks through campus, and the endless conversations about everything and nothing. He told me about the summer we spent traveling across Europe, sleeping in hostels and eating street food and feeling like the world belonged to us. He told me about the fights and the reconciliations, the jealousy and the trust, the slow, painful process of growing up together. "We broke up when we were 24, he said, his voice tinged with regret. "I wanted to move to New York to pursue my writing career. You wanted to stay here, close to your family. We tried long distance for a while, but it didn't work. The phone calls became less frequent. The visits became more difficult. And eventually, we just drifted apart. I met someone else, and you met Daniel, and we went our separate ways. I always thought we'd find our way back to each other someday. I was wrong. But I still dream about you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I still see your face. I still feel something real, something powerful, and I don't know what to do with that." Alex's eyes glistened with tears, and he squeezed my hand. "I still dream about you too," he said. "Every night, for 15 years. You were the love of my life, Claire. I've never stopped loving you. And I've never stopped hoping that someday, somehow, we would find our way back to each other. Maybe this is that someday. Maybe the accident was fate, giving us a second chance." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and full of possibility. I looked at Alex, at the man who had once been the center of my world, and I felt the tug of something powerful, something that felt like recognition, like homecoming, like the answer to a question I hadn't even known I was asking. But I also felt something else: doubt, confusion, the growing realization that the life I was remembering, the life with Alex, was not the life I had actually lived. It was a past, not a present. It was a memory, not a reality. And I had a present, a real, breathing, complicated present, with a husband and children and a house and a life that was waiting for me. "I have a husband," I said slowly, the words feeling strange in my mouth. "I have children. I have a life. Even if I don't remember them, they're real. They're waiting for me. And I can't just abandon them. I can't just walk away from everything I've built." Alex nodded, his expression sad but understanding. "I know," he said. "I would never ask you to, but I want you to know that I'm here. If you ever need me, if you ever want to talk, if you ever want to try to remember what we had, I'm not going anywhere." I left the coffee shop that day with my mind reeling and my heart torn in two. Alex Morgan was real. He was here. He still loved me. But Daniel was also real. Daniel was my husband, the father of my children, the man who had sat by my hospital bed and wept with joy when I opened my eyes. Daniel was my present, and Alex was my past. And I didn't know which one was more important. The weeks that followed were a struggle. I continued to meet with Alex, drawn by the memories that were slowly returning. We walked through the old neighborhood where we used to live, a charming district of brick buildings and tree-lined streets that felt both strange and familiar. We visited the park where we had our first picnic, spreading a blanket on the same patch of grass and eating sandwiches from the same deli. We sat in the same coffee shop and talked for hours, piecing together the fragments of a relationship that had ended 15 years ago. And with each meeting, I felt myself growing closer to Alex and further from Daniel. But at the same time, I was watching my husband. I was watching him take care of our children, helping Sophie with her homework and teaching Michael how to ride a bike. I was watching him make dinner and do laundry and handle all the 1,000 small tasks that kept our family running. I was watching him look at me with those sad, patient eyes, waiting for me to remember, waiting for me to love him the way he loved me. And I realized, slowly and painfully, that Daniel was not the stranger I had thought he was. He was a good man, a kind man, a man who had built a life with me, a real life, a life that was worth fighting for. The breakthrough came on a quiet Sunday afternoon, about 3 months after the accident. I was sitting in the living room of the house that Daniel said was ours, looking at old photographs, when Sophie came and sat down beside me. She was 7 years old, with her father's dark hair and my green eyes, and she was holding a book. It was a children's story, one I didn't recognize, with a colorful cover and a title that meant nothing to me. "Mommy," she said, her voice small and hopeful, "will you read to me? Daddy always reads to me, but I want you to do it. I miss your voice." I looked at the book, and something stirred in my chest. It was not a memory, not exactly. It was more like an echo, a faint trace of something that had once been there. I took the book from her hands, and I opened it, and I began to read. And as the words flowed from my mouth, something remarkable happened. The story felt familiar. The rhythm of the sentences, the cadence of the rhymes, the way the plot unfolded. And suddenly, I was not reading the book for the first time. I was remembering it. I was remembering sitting in this exact spot, with this exact child, reading this exact story. I was remembering the sound of Sophie's laughter, the warmth of her body curled against mine, the feeling of her small hand on my arm. And then I was crying. Great, heaving sobs that shook my entire body and scared my daughter and brought Daniel running from the other room. Because I remembered. Not everything. Not yet. But enough. Enough to know that this child, this beautiful, precious child, was my daughter. Enough to know that this house, this life, this family, was mine. Enough to know that I was home. Daniel knelt down beside me, his face full of concern, and he put his arm around my shoulders. "Claire," he said, his voice urgent. "What's wrong? What happened? Are you okay?" I looked at him through my tears, at this man who had been a stranger to me for 3 months, and I felt something shift inside me. Not love, not yet, but recognition. A beginning. A door opening onto a path that might lead me back to him. I remembered something. I said, my voice breaking. "Sophie." Reading to Sophie. I remembered reading to her. I remembered being her mother. Daniel's eyes filled with tears, and he pulled me into an embrace. "It's coming back," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Oh, thank God. It's coming back. I knew it would. I knew you would find your way back to us." The memories continued to return over the following weeks, not all at once, but in pieces. Fragments of our courtship, our wedding, the birth of our children. A song on the radio that I recognized. A smell in the kitchen that triggered a flood of images. A photograph that suddenly made sense. Daniel was patient throughout it all, never pushing, never demanding. He let me remember at my own pace, in my own way. And slowly, gradually, I began to fall in love with him again. Not the same love I had felt before, perhaps. That love was gone, erased by the accident. But a new love. A love built on the ashes of the old one. A love that was stronger and deeper and more resilient than anything I had ever known. Alex called me one last time, about a month after my breakthrough. His voice was soft and sad, and I could hear the resignation in it. "I've been thinking about you," he said, "wondering how you're doing, whether you're remembering, whether you're happy." "I'm remembering Daniel," I said. "I'm remembering our life. It's coming back, piece by piece. And I think that's where I belong. With him, with my children, with the life we built together." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Alex said, very quietly, "I understand. I always knew it would end this way. You were never really mine, Claire. You were always his. I just wanted one more chance to tell you that I loved you, that I never stopped loving you." "I know," I said, and my voice was gentle. "And I loved you too. Once. I'll always remember that. But the woman I am now, the woman I'm becoming, she belongs with Daniel. With her children. With her family. That's where my heart is. That's where my home is." Alex sighed, a sound that was full of resignation and regret, and, strangely, a kind of peace. "Take care of yourself," he said. "Be happy. That's all I ever wanted for you. That's all I ever wanted from the very beginning." "I will," I promised. "And I hope you find happiness too. Real happiness. The kind that lasts. You deserve it, Alex. You always have." We hung up, and I sat in the quiet of my living room, thinking about the strange journey I had been on. The accident had stolen my memories, but it had also given me a gift. It had forced me to confront the question of who I really was, of what I really wanted, of where I truly belonged. And the answer, when it finally came, was not the answer I had expected. It was not the answer that my dreams had suggested. It was the answer that my heart had known all along, even when my mind had forgotten. I belonged with Daniel. I belonged with Sophie and Michael. I belonged in this house, in this life, in this family. Alex was my past, a beautiful and bittersweet memory that I would always treasure. But Daniel was my present and my future. He was the man I had chosen 15 years ago, and he was the man I would choose again today. Not because I remembered him, because I had fallen in love with him again. Not the old love, not the love that had been erased by the accident, but a new love. A love that was born in the crucible of pain and confusion and had emerged stronger for it. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift of all. The knowledge that even when my memories failed, even when my mind was shattered and broken, my heart still knew where it belonged.